let's get
Right.
into plant-based diet, right? You do a lot of work to demystify things, or try to perhaps bust some myths and so on and so forth. For you, what are your most broad or general ask questions around plant-based diet? Like, what is the stuff that you hear the most that you're like, guys, this is not true?
This is a fabulous question. And the answer to that is there are actually many myths circulating, as you touched upon earlier, as with many topics online, there's so many myths surrounding it. So, one of the most common ones is obviously, since I try to build as much muscle as I possibly can, people usually always ask me the question, what about proteins? And with proteins, we can actually divide kind of like the questions and the myths that come up into two categories. The bioavailability of proteins, meaning how many proteins can you actually absorb for them from plant-based food sources, and can you get enough proteins from plants? And those are actually two topics that usually always come up. On the ethic science of point, there are also quite a lot of things. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the videos, but people saying that you actually cause more suffering and death if you go vegan due to crop deaths. And there are also many other myths. So this is a topic that you and I guess, can spend hours upon
Yeah.
talking touching upon all these topics. But maybe we want to focus on a couple of topics. Maybe we
I
can
think
focus.
let's start with protein, because I think that's something that's very very common. It's a very common question, right? Especially if you are looking to work out and put on muscle.
Yes. So the reason why so many people think that plant proteins are inferior to animal-based proteins is basically, and now we are actually going backwards in time again. Like a couple of decades ago, or maybe 1 decade ago, I can't fully remember, the DIS score was introduced. The DIS score is the digestible indispensable amino acid score. Sounds like a mouthful, but all there is, it's basically a scoring system which determines how many amino acids, and amino acids are basically the building blocks for proteins. You can kind of see it, amino acids, as Lego blocks that you have to stick and glue together in order to build proteins. That's what they are. And due to the DIS score, plant proteins scored not so good in the scoring system. And that's how many people, even to this day, still feel like plant proteins. And another myth is basically that plants don't have all the 9 essential amino acids. That's also something that we can briefly touch upon, because that's simply not true.
This is
But
what you spoke about on the reel, right? The reaction video to my episode.
yes, so every single plant has all the 9 essential amino acids. And essential means we cannot synthesize those amino acids, meaning our bodies cannot synthesize it. So we have to eat it through our diet. And every single plant has all the 9 essential amino acids. Doesn't matter if you talk about broccoli, rocket salad, nuts, seeds, whole grains, it doesn't really matter. What, however, is different is the concentration of the amino acids found in different type of plant foods. And that's where the confusion usually gets created, I guess. But all protein originates in the soil in form of plants. I mean, we mammals, as are the cows that we eat, uh, we don't create protein by ourselves, basically, or amino acids, I should say. So they have to eat the plants as well in order to get them, because to mammals, those amino acids are also essential. The same as with omega 3, for example, for the fish. It's essential for the fish, and they have to eat it through the algae. So it's that kind of process. But circling back to proteins, basically, and the bioavailability, which I guess also is a huge topic on the internet right now. If you look at what the DI score is and how it's basically determined, a couple of things become clear. and it has a couple of limitations. So the DI score is usually used by the FAO, which combats world hunger. That's their mission. So we are talking about starving people here. People in countries, sadly, that they don't have access to supermarkets, or if they do, they may not have money to buy certain things there. And they looked at food in isolation, basically. And that's the first limitation, meaning they didn't actually give the animals, another topic, another limitation that I will touch upon soon. They gave those animals foods in isolation, meaning they gave beans in isolation, peas in isolation, nuts, seeds, meat, dairy products, and whatever they actually wanted to test.
That makes no sense even to a layperson. Like that itself doesn't make sense. But please go on.
Exactly. Like on a day-to-day practice, I don't know anybody who just eats potatoes all days. Me again, you find different diets out there, and I guess some people watching this are just eating potatoes. That's not a knock on you. I
Yeah,
just say for the vast majority, and we need to talk in general when we talk to people because we're reaching thousands of people. We cannot include the special kind of cases every single time. Otherwise, you would have during each video you would have to make so many explanation points,
yeah,
and people would just get bored of it. So but aside from that, foods in isolation is the first part. The second limitation is it was mostly tested on rodents and pigs. And last time I checked, although they are similar with humans, they are not really humans. And we always want to see if we can replicate results that we have from animal studies in human studies, in human outcome data, which we have nowadays. But that's something that I will touch also a little bit later because I want to finish with the DI score. Other limitations are again the absorption of the amino acids. That's also a little bit different in animals, and so on and so forth. But one of the biggest limitation was actually that they gave the food not only in isolation but also in the raw form. So the pigs were eating raw lentils, raw chickpeas, legumes, and I don't know about you, but it's like eating stones if you eat
yeah.
legumes raw, kind of like. So a bunch of me, you can see that it has a bunch of limitation. Again, in the sense of starving people, telling people that just can eat maybe one or two types of different foods, it makes total sense to use the scoring system. But in studies, even scientists referred to that. The DI score gets commonly misused, and it shouldn't actually be used for people that have access to tons of food, and especially not on athletes that want to build muscles. So that's where the misconception comes from. The more interesting angle is what does the data say when we compare a plant based diet to an omnivorous diet and we match the proteins, calories, and leucine intake. Leucine is one of the 9 essential amino acids, which kind of like activates some protein complexes that then actually correlates or yeah, kind of like to muscle growth called mTOR. But that's not have been fully studied yet, and we don't know the kind of mechanisms yet 100%, but they tried to match everything. And we have a couple of studies, not a lot, but I always tell people, we should always adjust our point of view to the new data that comes out and to the best data we have available. And the best data we have available are those said studies. And when we compared kind of like the two different diets with crossover trials, meaning they had one group eat the omnivorous diet and the other group the plant-based diet, and then they switched the groups. Once you actually did that, they saw no significant differences, or actually no differences at all between these two diets. So it basically, the lack of concentration within the plant foods gets nullified once you reach a certain caloric intake, basically. So again, once new data comes out and it shows like, hey, animal-based proteins are clearly better than plant proteins, I'm happy. Well, I'm not happy because I'm vegan, but I will adjust my point of view, obviously, because we have to be objective, even about veganism as well. So